Okay, gonna start to try and see and if I could rememberize, maybe learn a little bit the diagram on a single system HVAC. So it's gonna be just Google it and find it. Okay. See if I see what I got. Okay. So I got the compressor and the condenser. So for me, I started with just the compressor to like try to rememberize. And then you have the evaporator. The way I did it was the evaporator starts before the compressor, or is before evaporator. Okay. Um, so they have it going like this, and then there's coils, and then it ends up going like this on the outside. But there's two loops in it, but I'm just doing one. Part of memorizing it was trying to, I guess, learn it. Made it easier to try and memorize the new things. So first memorize a few things, and then try to just like explain it to yourself. And then it'll be easier to stick. And then you pick out 3, 2, however many more new things, and then you just keep repeating until you have the whole diagram or whatever it is. So I started with the compressor, that was like the cheat point. Then evaporator goes before the compressor, and there's 3 things, like main things, I guess. I remember there was a condenser, so that was, I guess that helped me a lot. Okay, so next there's a fan that goes into the condenser. It's called a condenser fan. Little things like, I don't know if it's condense spelled with the OR at the end or ER, can kind of be a little thing you can try to hold on to the memory to. Like when you find out if it's OR or ER. You remember the moment where you find out it's OR instead of ER, and then you just pull from there. Okay. Um, so we had these arrows were blue, so I'm guessing the air is colder than this hot side. What they had was up to here was the hot side. So this whole line is red. From here all the way to here. And then this line is blue from here to there. Okay, so this is also the liquid line. This, I remember hearing liquid side or something like that when I used to take this. Okay. So I guess there is a liquid side where the liquid or the refrigerant is actually liquid, and then another side where it's like vapor or gas. Another diagram had this called refrigerant filled tubing. Okay. Now, there is ambient, which also means outside. Outside, outside. Air in. And that's the one that's going in here. So it would make sense that the outside air, well, at least in the diagram, the outside air is cooler because these are blue arrows than this whole line. Okay. A different diagram had basically this diagram right here, the one that had this, it made it easier because I noticed that the air on this half of the system, the split system, was inside, and the top part was outside. So the way I rememberized that was, again, you start with like cheat points where you don't necessarily understand it, you just remember it. So it kind of happened on accident where I was trying to write it fast, so I wrote out, so that way I wouldn't forget it because I was still remembering it, trying to memorize it, and then I wrote, but that actually wrote it out all the way inside. So that created a little moment that I could remember. I could remember the moment that I wrote half of the first word, and then the second word I wrote inside the rest of it, so that can help memorize, and then teach yourself from there. So this isn't necessarily for this diagram, but it can help. So I'm just gonna cross it out like to try and help on parts that it does help. So the outside for the split system was, I guess, the system that was outside or something, but since this is a single system, they replaced outside with the ambient air in. Okay. Now, okay, so we had a metering device here. I'm guessing it's like a sensor or something. Says how hot the refrigerant is or something. Metering device. And then above it, they had a fan, kind of like this one, which is again another way to remember it. But they called it a. This also had an X within it on the diagram, but whatever. They called this the evaporator blower. I was able to memorize that by getting it wrong multiple times. Again, you create a moment and then you can remember it. So I kept thinking it was fan like this one, but then I kept correcting myself by seeing that I got it wrong, and you put the right word in there and it's blower. So just memorize that moment, and it'll stick. Easier to pull that memory out of the library. So they had, so remember it was inside air on this side of the system for the split, but for the single, I guess, I mean, it's all in one. So the words were changed a little bit. Instead of inside air in, it was, again, remember, this is the hot side. The liquid line is the hot side. So all I did was to memorize it was take some cheat points that I memorized only instead of like had information about it. Okay, so at the end of at this side of the compressor, it's all red, hot side. From here, side of the evaporator to the other side, it's all cold. Boom. Okay, we did our line across. The top was outside or out, and the bottom was inside. Okay, so you just add it together. This is a fan, so air. Okay, so hot inside, air in, and then air out. So they replace the words, because it's a single system, to warm, which I remembered because I got it wrong and I had to correct it a couple times. Warm, return, air, in. And this arrow, again, they didn't have enough room, so they had two arrows going in, and then a third arrow on top went towards the label there, warm air, warm return air. So again, stuff like that can help pull the string out so you can remember it. And then this was a dryer. Don't know what that is for yet. Liquid side, right. Okay, so I had a whole way to memorize the words over here. Let's write this first. Hold on. Warm return air in, and then again, because I got the words wrong a couple times, I had to replace them. This is what this was called: cool supply air out, as opposed to on the split system, which was cold air, cold outside air, cold inside, air, out. All right, and then so you would guess that if there's hot water and it turns in and it steams, that the steam is hot. But just for the sake of memorizing this diagram, we can go with I went with the following. Uh, literally like just saying that stuff to myself, and then going into, but for this diagram, just to remember it, it's like the opposite. Obviously, it may not work like this, but just to memorize it would be the hot water creating steam. It would be like a hot air, but this way, but for this diagram, it's the opposite. So cool air comes out. So if water is turning into hot air, what is that? The If water is turning into hot air, what is that? What is that process? That's evaporating. And they just literally just labeled it evaporator. Okay. So for the system, when it evaporates, it turns it cold. Obviously, I'm not saying this is what exactly happens. I'm just using words to rememberize a diagram. So this is the hot line as we had before, and this is the cold side. So as soon as this liquid goes into this box, it turns cold. So because whatever process happens within this box, the cold steam, the cold air that happens, it goes wherever it wants. We can have a fan there to blow that cold air wherever we want, but the point is when the liquid goes in here, it's hot. Something happens in this box, cold air happens. Okay, put that aside. The liquid within here has to go somewhere, and we're going to just keep reusing it over and over and over again. So we have to move it along. So it would make sense that when they call this a suction line, that makes sense. Again, I'm not sure if this is how it actually works. It's just to memorize a diagram for fun to see if I like it. Okay, let's see. Also, again, because I got it wrong a couple times. The point right there is called a compressor inlet. I'm going to just put parentheses for compressor. Inlet. And then here, not the line that I put, just put that point right there at the exit. Again, it's called a compressor outlet. And again, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what side's of beginning, what side's the end. But I'm assuming, just going from left to right, top to bottom, that that's the inside, that's the outside. That's how I started to attempt to remember it, and it was correct on the diagram, so I didn't get it wrong. multiple times. I got it correct multiple times, and then that within itself is a way to remember it. Inlet, outlet. Compressor inlet, compressor outlet. So likewise, if we're remembering it right, if this is the inlet, this is the outlet, or we're looking for a word here that is like exit, discharge, push out, something that like pushing it out. Again, we had our suction line here that was sucking the refrigerant to move it along. This is called a discharge line, which makes sense. When I'm trying to memorize it, it makes sense. And with just creating those moments, suction line, this is the inside, this is the outside, inlet, outlet, this is the discharge line. With that little moment of it making sense, when I see, oh, I've missed it or I got it wrong, this is another way, another string to use to pull that memory out. Just layering on those ways to remember. Okay, these were cold arrows, assuming which probably means like the outside air, the ambient air out is cooler than this high side. Did we have anything else? We had the liquid line here. This is all red from this side of the compressor all the way to this side of the evaporator. And then here is all cold. We have the dryer. We have the metering device with the X in the box, because on their diagram they have a box and an X within it. Again, another way to memorize it. Evaporator, blower, the warm return air in, cool supply air out. I think that's everything. Okay, let's see if I got it, if I remembered it right. Compressor, condenser, evaporator, obviously. Again, that's it. That within itself is another way to remember it. Okay, just taking off stress off of the moment is another way to remember it. Okay, compressor inlet, compressor outlet. Then we have the discharge line. We have the condenser fan. We remembered the blue arrows. We had the ambient, which also means outside air in. This was the liquid line. We remembered it was red all the way here to the evaporator. This is the dryer. They had the metering device that had an X within the box. The evaporator blower. The warm return air. This is all blue from the evaporator here to the compressor. We had cool supply air out, and then we had the suction line here. Yep, that's all right we remembered the diagram correctly for the single system. Nice.